$239,083. That's how much my sister stole, cashing our dead father's Social Security checks over 19 years. I found out 3 years in, kept quiet for 16 more. I process death certificates for a living. I know what fraud looks like on paper, and I carried my sister's secret until she made the mistake of threatening me. Let me take you back. My father, Raymond Price, died in May of 1993. I was 20 years old. He went in for what was supposed to be a routine procedure, a valve replacement, and he never came home. The hospital called Patricia first. She was the oldest, 7 years ahead of me, and in our family, that meant she was the one in charge. She was always the one in charge. I was still numb when Patricia started making the calls. The funeral home, the church, the insurance company. I sat at my father's kitchen table and watched her move through it like she had a checklist in her head, and I remember thinking how strong she was, how capable. My mother had passed 4 years earlier, and with Daddy gone, Patricia was all I had left. Her and Aunt May, that was it. That was my whole family. Patricia handled the funeral arrangements top to bottom. She picked the casket, the flowers, the program. She spoke with the pastor. She dealt with the paperwork, all of it. I was 20 years old and drowning in grief, and Patricia just took the wheel. What I did not know, what I would not learn for another 3 years, was that Patricia also handled the Social Security paperwork, or rather, she didn't handle it. She didn't report my father's death to the Social Security Administration. Not to the funeral home's notification system, not to the state, not to anyone. She just let the checks keep coming. $1,000 a month, my dead father's benefit check, deposited into an account Patricia controlled. Month after month after month, I found out in 1996. I was 23. I had driven up to Patricia's house on a Saturday afternoon. She was in the back bedroom, and I was looking for a pin in the kitchen drawer when I found the envelopes, government envelopes, Social Security Administration, addressed to Raymond Price. 4 of them stacked together, already opened. I pulled out one of the statements, my father's name, his Social Security number, a direct deposit confirmation, dated that same month. 3 years after he died, my hands went still. I stood there in my sister's kitchen holding proof of a federal crime, and my whole body went cold. I counted backward. 3 years, 36 checks, $36,000. Patricia walked in and saw my face. She didn't even flinch. She looked at the envelope in my hand and said, "That's Daddy's account, Lori. The government never cut it off. I've been putting that money aside." Putting it aside. That's how she said it, like she was doing the family a favor, like she was a responsible woman managing an estate, not cashing a dead man's checks. I opened my mouth to say something, I don't even know what, and that's when Aunt May spoke up from the living room doorway. I hadn't even known she was in the house. That's family business, Lori." Aunt May's voice was calm, final. The way she said things, when she meant there would be no discussion. "We don't put family in prison." I looked at Aunt May. I looked at Patricia. 2 women, the only family I had left in this world, standing in that kitchen, telling me without saying it that my silence was the price of belonging. I was 23 years old. My parents were both dead. I had a baby, Marcus, who was not even a year old. I had no husband, no savings, no one else. If I lost Patricia and Aunt May, I lost everything. So I closed my mouth. I put the envelope back in the drawer. I walked out to my car. I drove home, and I did not say a word. That was the beginning of the longest silence of my life. What I did not understand at 23, what took me years to see clearly, was that the moment I closed that drawer, Patricia owned me. My silence wasn't loyalty. It was leverage, and she would spend the next 16 years spending it. It started that same year, 1996, 2 months after I found the envelopes. Patricia called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice had that particular softness she used when she wanted something, a warmth that felt like family until you learned what was underneath it. "Lori, I've been thinking about Daddy's grave. He deserves a proper headstone. That plot out there doesn't even have a marker yet." She was right. 3 years and no headstone. It had been eating at me. I want to take care of it, Patricia said. But you know how tight things are for me right now. Could you cover the cost? I'll pay you back when I can. The headstone cost $2,400. I paid for it with overtime, 6 months of Saturday shifts at the assessor's office, $38,400 a year. That was my salary. Every dollar accounted for, every paycheck stretched to cover rent and diapers and daycare for Marcus. $2,400 for a headstone for my dead father. Paid by me. His younger daughter, the one making $38,000 a year. Patricia, the one who asked me to pay, had approximately $36,000 in fraud proceeds sitting in an account with my father's name on it. But I didn't say that. I didn't say anything. I paid for the headstone and told myself I was honoring my father. And Patricia let me. That was the pattern. That was how the next 16 years would go. Patricia's lifestyle changed quietly at first. You had to be paying attention, and I was, even when I didn't want to be. In 1999, she took a trip to Las Vegas with a friend from church. On her salary, that made no sense. In 2003, she bought a used Camry with cash. I saved up, she told me. I was driving a 2001 Corolla I had bought used with 94,000 miles on it. By 2003, it had 147,000 miles and an engine light that never went off. Patricia took Aunt May to Red Lobster. I ate lunch at my desk, a sandwich from home, every single day for 22 years. Patricia got her kitchen remodeled. I skipped dental work for 2 years because I could not afford the $400 copay. Patricia handed out $50 bills at the holiday table every Christmas. Crisp bills, one for everybody, tucking them into cards with her neat handwriting. A little something for everybody. And I sat there, watching, knowing exactly where those $50 bills came from. My father's Social Security check, $1,000 a month, give or take, adjusted up over the years with cost of living increases. $12,500 a year in money that should have stopped the day he died. And Patricia spent it in front of me every holiday, every dinner, every phone call where she said, "My treat, Lori. Order whatever you want." That's the thing about carrying a secret like that. It doesn't just sit still. It grows. It attaches itself to every conversation, every meal, every moment where your sister smiles at you across the table covered in food you know was paid for with a dead man's name. I told myself things to survive it. I didn't start it. Patricia would have done this whether I knew or not. It's the government, not a real person. If I say something now, it'll be worse because it's been so long. If I say something, I lose everyone. Each excuse was true enough to carry me through another month, another year, another 5 years. The loan started in 1998, small amounts, always phrased the same way. "I'm a little short this month, Lori. You know how it is. $200 here, $300 there." Patricia would call, and her voice would carry that particular blend of sheepishness and entitlement that only family can pull off. The tone that says, "I shouldn't have to ask, but I'm asking, and you shouldn't say no because we're blood." I never said no, not once. And Patricia never paid me back, not once. $200 for a car repair she didn't need, $300 for a bill she could have covered, $200 for groceries she could have bought 3 times over with the check that came every month like clockwork from an agency that still thought her father was alive. I kept track. I couldn't help it. I am a records clerk. I process documents for a living. I file, I tabulate, I cross-reference. Numbers are what I do. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 22 years. So while I never wrote it down, I carried a running total in my head the way other people carry song lyrics or phone numbers. It was just there, always updating, always growing. 200, then 500, then 800, then 1,200. By the time I had been silent for 10 years, I had lent Patricia $4,800 in small amounts. Not one penny returned. I had paid $2,400 for my father's headstone. I had spent $150 a year on cemetery upkeep, flowers for his birthday and Father's Day, because Patricia never offered. 16 years of that, another $2,400. And Patricia, the woman who borrowed my $200 because she was a little short, had cash somewhere around $120,000 in our dead father's checks by 2003. By 2008, It was closer to 180,000. I sat at my desk at the assessor's office. I processed death certificates with other people's fathers' names on them. I filed property records for estates that were handled honestly, where families reported deaths and closed accounts and did the right thing. And I went home every night knowing that my own family had not done the right thing and that I had helped them not do it by keeping my mouth shut. And the numbers never stopped adding up in my head. That was the thing. I am a woman who counts. I count pages, I count files, I count the days until payday. And without meaning to, without wanting to, I had been counting my sister's crime for years. 235 checks. That's how many she would cash before it was over. $239,083. 19 years of a dead man's name on government paper turned into cash at a check cashing counter in Tacoma month after month while I sat at a desk 10 miles away processing the paperwork of honest families and pretending mine was one of them. But I am getting ahead of myself because before the end came, before the phone call that changed everything, there were still years of silence left to carry, and the weight, as someone would eventually tell me, does not get lighter. It gets heavier. It was Geneva Whitfield who said those words. Fall of 2010, a Sunday morning at Mount Olive Baptist, 17 years into my silence. Geneva was 62 years old, a woman built close to the ground with hands that stayed folded in her lap during every service I had ever attended with her. She sat 3 pews ahead of me, always on the left side, always in the same navy dress with the white collar. I had known her for years, the way you know church people by their seat and their handshake and the covered dish they bring to the potluck. I did not know her story, not until that morning. Pastor Williams had opened the floor for testimony. Geneva stood up slowly, the way people do when they have been carrying something heavy and are about to set it down in front of strangers. She turned to face the congregation. She did not smile. She did not cry. She just spoke. 7 years ago, she said, I'd earned my brother into the police for insurance fraud. He had been filing false claims for almost 5 years. I knew about it for 4 of those years. 4 years I carried that secret, and it nearly killed me. The church was quiet, not the polite quiet of people waiting for their turn, the held breath quiet of people who recognize something true. The truth don't get lighter the longer you carry it, Geneva said. It gets heavier. Every year I kept my mouth shut. I lost a piece of myself I didn't even know I was giving away. My sleep, my appetite, my peace. I carried my brother's secret for 4 years and it nearly killed me. The day I put it down was the day I started breathing again. She sat back down. Pastor Williams said something after that, something about courage and righteousness, but I did not hear it. I was sitting in my pew with my hands pressed flat against the wood on either side of my legs, and Geneva's words were moving through me the way a crack moves through glass. Not shattering, just spreading, reaching every corner. The truth don't get lighter, it gets heavier. I had been carrying my sister's secret for 14 years. I did not sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. 3 nights I lay in my bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's kitchen drawer. The government envelopes, my father's name on paper that should not have existed. I saw Aunt May in the doorway. I heard her voice. That's family business, Lori. But now I heard Geneva's voice too. And Geneva's voice said something different. Geneva's voice said the weight was killing me. And for the first time in 14 years, I did not argue with the truth of that. I went to work on the 4th day with my eyes swollen and my hands unsteady. I sat down at my desk at the assessor's office and I opened my first file of the morning. A death certificate. Pierce County, State of Washington, cause of death, cardiac arrest. The family had done everything right. They had reported the death within 72 hours. They had closed the accounts. They had filed the paperwork. I stared at that certificate for a long time. I processed 12 death certificates that week. I filed 6 fraud referrals for the county. I cross-referenced property records against the state filings, the same work I had done every week for the last 17 years. But that week, for the first time, every file felt like a mirror. Every death certificate that was properly reported reminded me of the one that wasn't. Every fraud referral I processed reminded me of the fraud I carried home in my silence every single night. I am a records clerk. I know what compliance looks like. I know what a clean file looks like, what a proper notification looks like, what it looks like when a family does the right thing, even when it hurts. And I knew with a clarity that Geneva's words had cracked wide open, that my family had not done the right thing, and that I had been standing next to that failure for 14 years, filing other people's honesty while protecting my own family's lie. I still did not act. Not yet. The crack was there, but the door was still closed. It would take 2 more years and 1 more betrayal before I opened it. But something had shifted. The room where I kept Patricia's secret, the room I had sealed shut at 23 years old in her kitchen with Aunt May's voice ringing in my ears, that room was no longer airtight. Geneva had put a fracture in the wall, and the air that came through smelled like the truth. Let me go back for a moment, because there is something I have not told you yet, something I carried even deeper than the silence. 2008. My marriage fell apart. I will not go into the details because they are not the point of this story, but I will tell you that the divorce cost me $3,400 in lawyer fees, 5 months of overtime at a desk I was already chained to, and 2 years of skipped dental appointments because I could not afford the copay after the legal bills. I was 35 years old, alone. Marcus was 12, and I was trying to figure out how to pay first and last month's rent on a new apartment when Patricia called. "I got you, Lori," she said. Her voice was warm, soft, the way it always was when she wanted you to feel grateful. "That's what family does. I'm going to give you $1,600 for the first 2 months. You just get settled, okay? I'll take care of it." $1,600. I took it. I took every penny, and I knew exactly where it came from. By 2008, Patricia had cashed approximately $180,000 in our dead father's Social Security checks. 15 years of fraud. And I took $1,600 of it to pay my rent. That is my deepest shame. Not the silence, not the years of watching. The moment I reached out my hand and took money I knew was stolen from a dead man's name, because I was too broke and too scared and too alone to say no. But here's what I need you to understand, because I am a woman who counts and the numbers do not lie. By 2008, I had given Patricia $4,800 in small loans she never repaid. I had paid $2,400 for my father's headstone while she sat on tens of thousands. I had spent $2,400 on cemetery upkeep over 12 years because she never once offered. I had just spent $3,400 on divorce lawyer fees, earned through overtime at a job that paid me $38,400 a year. That is $13,000 I gave. Patricia gave me $1,600. Subtract her $1,600 from my $13,000. Patricia still owed me $11,400. I was not the one who had been helped. I was the one who had been bled, and the $1,600 was not generosity. It was a receipt, a transaction, a lease she would spend the next 4 years yanking. "Remember when I helped you?" Patricia would say. "Thanksgiving, Christmas, Marcus's birthday party, every phone call where I did not answer fast enough. Remember when nobody else was there for you, Lori? I was there. That's what sisters do." 4 years. 4 years she held that $1,600 over my head like it was a mortgage on my dignity. Every time she said it, I felt the leash tighten. Every time she reminded me, I heard the unspoken rest of the sentence. "And you owe me your silence." That was still the pattern in the fall of 2012. 19 years since my father died, 16 since I found the envelopes, 14 since the loan started, 4 since the divorce money, and then something cracked from the outside. Patricia called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was different, not the warm voice, not the soft voice, the careful voice. "Lori, something happened at the check cashing place. Some girl, some young teller started asking questions, wanted to know why Daddy never comes in himself, asked for a power of attorney or some kind of phone verification." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I felt something cold move through my chest. 19 years, 228 checks by that point, give or take. And a young teller at a check cashing counter in Tacoma had finally asked the question that no one in my family had been willing to ask. Why has this elderly man never appeared in person? I thought Patricia would stop. I thought the teller's questions would scare her enough to walk away, close the account, let it go. 19 years of stolen money. Surely that was enough. I was wrong. Patricia did not stop. She did not slow down. She did not even pause. Instead, she did something that changed everything I thought I knew about who my sister was. She forged a power of attorney, a legal document fabricated with my dead father's name on it, granting Patricia Price Holt authority to manage his financial affairs. She created it from scratch. She signed a dead man's name, and she brought it back to that check cashing counter like it was nothing. But the teller wanted more. She wanted phone verification. She wanted to hear from Raymond Price himself, the man whose checks had been cashed at that counter for nearly 2 decades, the man who had been dead since 1993. So Patricia got a friend, a man whose name I never learned, to pick up the phone and pretend to be our dead father. He called the check cashing business. He confirmed the power of attorney. He verified that, yes, Patricia had his full authorization. He played the role of a man who had been in the ground for 19 years. When Patricia told me this, she told it like it was clever, like she had solved a problem. She laughed, a short laugh, the kind that means I handled it. I did not laugh. I stood in my kitchen and I understood something I had been refusing to understand for 16 years. Patricia was never going to stop. Not because of a teller, not because of risk, not because of the law. She had been doing this for 19 years. And when the first real challenge appeared, she did not retreat. She committed new crimes. She forged federal documents. She got someone to impersonate a dead man. She doubled down. The woman I had protected with my silence, the woman I had called sister, the woman whose secret I had carried until it cost me my sleep and my teeth and my peace of mind. That woman looked at the possibility of getting caught and decided the answer was more fraud, more forgery, more lies. A few weeks later, Patricia called again. This time her voice was not warm and it was not careful. It was controlled, measured, like someone choosing each word before letting it out. Lori, I need you to listen to me. There are people asking questions, not just the teller. People in the neighborhood. Somebody's been coming around. She meant investigators. She did not say the words Social Security Administration Office of the Inspector General. She did not have to. I knew what federal investigators looked like. I worked in government. I processed their paperwork. I just need you to keep doing what you've been doing, Patricia said. Nothing has changed. We just need to be careful. Like I was part of it. Like my silence was a partnership and not a prison. I hung up the phone and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about Geneva Whitfield standing in that church pew 2 years earlier. I thought about what she said. The truth don't get lighter, it gets heavier. I thought about the weight I had been carrying since I was 23 years old. And I thought about my sister forging a dead man's signature and laughing about it. And I thought about a stranger pretending to be my father on the phone. And I thought about the $1,600 Patricia held over my head every holiday. And I thought about the $11,400 she actually owed me. And I thought about my son Marcus, who was 16 years old and had no idea that his mother had been keeping a federal secret since before he was born. Patricia was not going to stop. She was not going to slow down. She had looked at 19 years of fraud and decided it was not enough. She had looked at a federal investigation and decided the answer was more crime. And her voice on that last phone call, that controlled, measured, careful voice, that was not the voice of a sister who was scared. That was the voice of a woman who was calculating, positioning, deciding what to do about the only person who knew everything. Me. Something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel weather change, not in what you see, but in what the air does to your skin. Patricia's warmth was gone. The soft voice was gone. The I got you, Lori, was gone. What was left was something harder, something colder, and it was pointed directly at me. I did not know yet what she would say, but I knew, the way you know things you have been refusing to know for 16 years, that the next time my sister called, everything between us would be different and there would be no going back. The call came on a Thursday evening, late November 2012. I was standing at my kitchen counter cutting an onion for soup when my phone lit up with Patricia's name. I answered, and my sister dropped every mask she had ever worn. "Lori, I need you to hear me." Her voice was flat, no warmth, no softness, no careful choosing of words, just a woman who had done the math and decided I was the problem. "You knew since 1996, Lori. You sat at my table and ate food I bought with the money. You took $1,600 from me when your marriage fell apart. You think they won't ask about that?" She paused. One breath. "You say one word, and I will tell them everything, every holiday, every dollar, every year you knew and said nothing." I did not move. The knife was still in my hand. The onion was still on the board. "You want Marcus to watch them put handcuffs on his mother?" Marcus, my son. 28 years old, the one person in my life who still looked at me like I was whole. Patricia had said his name like a weapon, because that is what it was. I stood there. The kitchen was quiet except for the clock above the stove, and I heard it all at once, not just what she said, but what she meant. Every Thanksgiving plate she ever fixed me, every $50 bill she tucked into a Christmas card, every time she said, "I got you, Lori." None of it was love. Every single act of generosity for 16 years was insurance. She was buying my silence one dinner, one holiday, one crisp bill at a time. And the $1,600 she gave me during my divorce was not help. It was a receipt she planned to cash the moment I became a threat. I had protected this woman for 16 years. I had lost sleep. I had lost teeth. I had carried her secret until it bent my spine. And she had been keeping a ledger the entire time, writing down every meal and every dollar so she could hold it over me if I ever opened my mouth. The sister I loved was a fiction. The woman on the phone was the real Patricia, had always been the real Patricia. "Do you hear me, Lori?" "I hear you," I said, and I hung up. I set the phone on the counter. I set the knife down next to it, and something went quiet inside my chest. Not broken, not angry, quiet. The way a room sounds after a door closes for the last time. I thought about Geneva Whitfield standing in that church pew 2 years earlier. The truth don't get lighter. It gets heavier. The day I put it down was the day I started breathing again. I had carried Patricia's secret for 16 years. I had carried the shame of the $1,600 for 4. I had carried the silence like it was loyalty when it was really a cage. I was putting it down. The next morning, I called a federal defense attorney named Victor Ashby. I found him the way I found everything, through records. I worked in government. I knew where to look. Ashby's office was in downtown Tacoma. I sat across from his desk with my hands folded in my lap, and I told him everything. 19 years, 235 checks, $239,083. My 16 years of silence, the $1,600 I took during my divorce, Patricia's threat. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Mrs. Price, your exposure is real. 16 years of knowledge plus the $1,600. That's enough for an accessory charge if they want to push it." I felt the floor tilt, but I did not look away. "But here's what changes everything," he said. "If you cooperate voluntarily, if you walk in before they come to you, you go from accessory to cooperating witness. The first person through the door gets the best outcome. That has always been true." He paused. Then he said something that changed the shape of everything. "The threat your sister made. That's not just cruelty, Mrs. Price. That's witness intimidation. 18 U.S.C. 1512. That is a separate federal crime. If she repeats it and you have it on tape, that recording doesn't just protect you, it becomes evidence of a new felony." I sat with that for a moment. My sister's threat, the word she chose to terrify me into silence, was itself a crime, a federal crime, separate from the fraud, separate from the forgery, a crime she committed the moment she opened her mouth and said Marcus's name. Ashby told me what to do. Cooperate with everything, bring the timeline, bring the recording, bring my full statement, walk in as a witness, not a defendant. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table and I picked up my phone. I opened the recording app. I pressed the red button. I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, satisfied. The voice of a woman who believed her threat had worked, who believed I was calling to surrender. I've been thinking about what you said, I told her. My voice was steady. I made sure of it. And Patricia, confident that she had won, repeated every word. The $1,600, the food at her table, the holidays, Marcus. She said it all again slowly. The way you explain something to a person you believe is too afraid to fight back. She did not know about the lawyer. She did not know about the recording. She did not know that every word she spoke was being saved to a file on my phone, time-stamped and clear. When she finished, I said, I understand. I pressed in. I set the phone on the kitchen table, and I sat there for a long time looking at the red light on the recording app, still blinking. The woman who had spent 16 years leveraging my silence had just handed me the only leverage I would ever need. Patricia's own voice, her own words, her own crime recorded, preserved, and ready. I had a lawyer. I had a recording. I had a plan. And for the first time in 16 years, I was not carrying the weight. I was putting it down. I made the call on a Monday morning, December 3rd, 2012. I sat at my kitchen table with the timeline in a manila folder, Victor Ashby's card next to the phone, and the recording saved on my device. I dialed the number for the Social Security Administration and asked to be connected to the office of the Inspector General. A woman answered. I gave my name. I gave my father's name. And then I said the words I had carried for 16 years. I would like to report Social Security fraud involving a deceased beneficiary. My father, Raymond Price, died in May of 1993. His checks have been cashed every month since then. 235 checks, $239,083. I have a complete timeline and recorded evidence, and I am calling voluntarily to cooperate. There was a pause on the other end, a long one. Mrs. Price, I'm going to transfer you to an investigator. Please hold. I held. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I had rehearsed nothing. I did not need to. The truth, when you have carried it for 16 years, does not require rehearsal. It just requires the decision to finally say it out loud. The investigator's name was Donna Reyes. She introduced herself calmly. Her voice was professional, direct, the voice of a woman who had heard 1,000 reports and knew how to listen to every single one. Mrs. Price, I understand you have information about benefits being collected on behalf of a deceased individual. Can you walk me through what you know? I walked her through everything. 19 years, the envelopes in the kitchen drawer, the checks cashed at a counter in Tacoma. My silence, Aunt May's words, the loans, the headstone I paid for, the $1,600, Patricia's escalation in the fall of 2012, the forged power of attorney, the man who impersonated my dead father on the phone, and then the threat. Mrs. Price, Donna Reyes said, you mentioned a threat. Can you be more specific? My sister called me in late November and told me that if I said one word, she would tell investigators that I had known for 16 years and taken money from her. She named my son. She said, you want Marcus to watch them put handcuffs on his mother? Silence. I recorded it, I said. My attorney advised me to call her back. She repeated the threat. I have the full recording on my phone, time-stamped. Another pause, longer this time. You recorded the threat, Donna Reyes repeated. Yes, ma'am. I heard her write something down. Then she spoke carefully. Mrs. Price, I need to ask you a direct question. Did you receive any of the funds from these checks? No, I said. My sister gave me $1,600 for rent during my divorce in 2008. Over the same period, I lent her $4,800 she never repaid. I paid $2,400 for my father's headstone. I paid $2,400 in cemetery upkeep. I spent $3,400 on my divorce. My net loss to Patricia is over $11,000. I was not a beneficiary. I was a source. She wrote that down too. Mrs. Price, based on what you're telling me and pending verification, you came forward voluntarily. You've provided a detailed timeline and recorded evidence of what appears to be witness intimidation. I want to be clear with you. You are being treated as a cooperating witness, not a subject, not a target. I closed my eyes, not a subject, not a target, a witness. Victor Ashby had told me exactly what would happen, and it happened exactly that way. I walked in carrying everything, and I walked out carrying nothing. I submitted the timeline. I submitted the recording. I gave my full written statement. Donna Reyes was thorough. She asked questions I had already answered in the paperwork, and I answered them again. She asked about dates. I gave her dates. She asked about amounts. I gave her amounts. I am a records clerk. I count everything. I have been counting this for 16 years. When she played the recording in her office, she paused it once. Right at the moment Patricia said Marcus's name. She looked at me. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The recording said everything. I went home that afternoon and sat in my kitchen. Same table, same chair, same window. But the room felt different, lighter, like something that had been pressing against the walls for 16 years had finally been let out. Patricia was arrested in January of 2013. I was not there. I heard about it the way you hear about things in a family that is no longer yours, through a cousin who called another cousin who told someone at church. Patricia was taken from her home, the same home where she hosted every Thanksgiving, the same home where she handed out $50 bills and Christmas cards, the same kitchen where I found the envelopes in 1996. I did not feel triumph. I felt gravity. The kind that comes when something you always knew would happen finally does. The paper trail was irrefutable. 235 checks, 19 years. Every deposit traced, every amount documented. The forged power of attorney, the phone impersonation, the witness intimidation recording. Patricia's attorney advised her to plead guilty. There was nothing to fight. She pleaded guilty. 235 separate acts of theft from the United States government, forgery, procurement of false statements, witness intimidation, 19 years of cashing a dead man's checks and building a life on the proceeds. The sentencing was in federal court. I sat in the third row. I wore a gray dress and flat shoes. I folded my hands in my lap the way I always do when I need to hold myself still. The judge reviewed the case. He spoke slowly. He named every charge. 235 checks over a period of 19 years, totaling $239,083 in theft of government funds. He paused. The defendant had 235 separate opportunities to stop. She chose to continue every single time. Patricia stood at the defense table. She did not move. 36 months in federal prison. Full restitution in the amount of $239,083. The court further orders forfeiture of the residential property at the defendant's address, the mortgage payments for which have been traced to fraud proceeds. 36 months, $239,083. The house, gone. Patricia's hands gripped the edge of the table. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. She did not look at me. She did not look at anyone. She stared straight ahead at the wall behind the judge, and her face was the face of a woman watching everything she built disappear. Tanya was there, Patricia's daughter, 34 years old. She sat through the charges. She sat through the evidence summary. She sat through the judge reading the scope of what her mother had done for 19 years. When the judge said home seized through federal asset forfeiture, Tanya stood up. She walked out of the courtroom before he finished. She did not look back. I sat still. I breathed. The investigation did not end with Patricia. The man who impersonated my dead father on the phone was identified and charged separately with federal crimes. Procurement of false statements. He had picked up a phone, pretended to be a man who had been dead for 19 years, and confirmed a forged document. That phone call earned him a federal case of his own. Aunt May Booker was interviewed by SSA investigators. She was 71 years old. She had known about the fraud since 1996, the same year I found out. The same afternoon, she told me to keep my mouth shut. That's family business, Lori. The investigators could not prove she had actively participated. She was not charged, but Pastor Williams called her the following Sunday. He asked her to step back from her role as deaconess at Mount Olive Baptist, a position she had held for 18 years. Aunt May, the woman who told me that family does not put family in prison, lost the title she wore like a crown every Sunday morning. The congregation did not hold a meeting. There was no formal vote. People simply stopped sitting near her, stopped calling, stopped bringing their grandchildren to her pew. The woman who had silenced me with family business learned what it felt like when the community decided she was no longer theirs. Every villain, every one, named, charged, sentenced, stripped, Patricia in a federal prison cell, her home seized, her daughter gone silent, her restitution order for $239,083 following her for the rest of her life. Her friend in a federal courtroom answering for a phone call he thought was a favor. Aunt May in a church pew with empty seats on either side. I sat in that courtroom after the sentencing, and I did not move for a long time. The room emptied. The clerk collected the files. Someone turned off the overhead lights in the gallery. I was still sitting there, hands in my lap, breathing, not gloating, not celebrating, not even relieved, not yet, just breathing. The way you breathe when something that was sitting on your chest for 16 years finally stands up and walks out of the room. The justice was complete. Every loop closed. Every count answered. Every person who had played a role in keeping that fraud alive and keeping me silent, in profiting from a dead man's name, had been named and held to account. But justice, I would learn, does not come free. It comes with a bill of its own, and I had not yet opened the envelope. The bill came in pieces. Patricia reported to federal prison in March of 2013. The house, the one where she hosted every Thanksgiving, where she handed out $50 bills and Christmas cards, where I found the envelopes in 1996, was seized through federal asset forfeiture. The locks were changed. The kitchen where she kept the drawer was emptied by marshals. I drove past it once about a week after. The curtains were gone. The driveway was empty. A notice from the Department of Justice was taped to the front door. The kind of notice you cannot argue with, the kind that says, this property now belongs to the United States government. The local news ran the story. A short piece, 3 paragraphs, buried in the crime section. But it was enough. The church knew. The neighborhood knew. The woman everyone called generous, the one who picked up the check at Red Lobster and slid $50 bills across the table at Christmas, that woman was in a federal prison for cashing a dead man's checks for 19 years. And everyone who had ever sat at her table was now doing the same math I had done in 1996. $239,083 in restitution would follow Patricia for the rest of her life. The reputation would not recover. The generosity that had made her the center of every family gathering was exposed for what it always was, a performance funded by fraud. I thought knowing that would feel like something. It didn't, not yet. The call from Tanya came 3 days after the sentencing. I was at home making dinner. The phone rang and I saw her name and I almost didn't answer because some part of me already knew what was coming. You did this. Tanya's voice was shaking. Not the controlled shake of someone choosing their words. The raw shake of a woman whose entire world had been rearranged in a courtroom. You sat in that courtroom and watched them take everything. You could have handled this privately. You could have talked to her. You could have done anything except what you did. I let her talk. I did not interrupt. 19 years, Dolores. You knew for 16 of them. 16 years and you said nothing, and then you went to the federal government. You destroyed this family. You know that, right? You destroyed it. I held the phone to my ear and I listened to my niece cry because that is what it became underneath the anger, crying. The sound of a 34-year-old woman learning that the mother she loved had built their life on a lie and choosing to blame the person who told the truth instead of the person who told the lie. "Tanya," I said, "I'm sorry you're hurting." She hung up. She did not call again. Not the next week, not the next month, not ever. I learned later through the same cousin chain that had told me about Patricia's arrest that Tanya stopped visiting her mother in prison. She had sat through the sentencing. She had heard the judge name 235 separate opportunities to stop. She had watched the scope of her mother's fraud laid out in federal court, check by check, year by year, and somewhere in that courtroom, Tanya's anger at me turned into something else, something quieter, something she could not direct at anyone without it coming back to the same address. She went silent. And that silence was its own kind of answer. The first Thanksgiving after was the quietest meal I have ever eaten. I set the table for two, me and Marcus. No Patricia, no Aunt May, no cousins. The group chat had gone dead weeks earlier. The holiday invitations had stopped. The family that had been held together by Patricia's table, Patricia's money, Patricia's $50 bills, had scattered the moment the table was exposed as stolen goods. I looked at the empty chairs, 4 of them. I had bought a small turkey because the large one seemed dishonest for 2 people. Marcus carved it. We ate. We did not talk about Patricia. We did not talk about the trial. We talked about his job in the Seahawks and whether the cranberry sauce was better than last year's. And when he left, I washed the dishes alone and stood at the sink looking at the kitchen window. And the face looking back at me was the face of a woman who had told the truth and lost her family for it. That is what justice costs, not just the telling, the after, the chairs that empty, the phone that stops ringing, the Sunday dinners that shrink to a table for one. I chose this. I would choose it again, but I will not pretend that choosing was free. Weeks passed. The weight was off my chest, but my chest was sore from carrying it so long. I went to work. I came home. I ate alone most nights. I slept better than I had in years, but I woke up to a quiet house, and sometimes quiet is just another word for empty. It was a Sunday in March, 2 months after the sentencing, when Geneva Whitfield found me sitting on the bench outside Mount Olive Baptist after service. I had not gone inside. I had driven to the church, parked, and sat on that bench in the cold, watching people file in through the front doors, and I could not make myself follow them. Geneva came out after the service ended. She did not say hello. She did not ask why I hadn't come in. She sat down next to me on that bench, folded her hands in her lap the way she always did, and looked straight ahead. We sat like that for a while. 2 women on a bench outside a church saying nothing. Then Geneva spoke. I know exactly what that feels like. The empty seat at the table, the phone that stops ringing, the people who look at you like you broke something that was already broken. She paused. Give it time. Does it get easier? I asked. No, she said. But you get used to breathing again, and then one day you realize the air is yours. She patted my hand once. Then she stood up and walked to her car. That was it. That was enough. Geneva had turned in her own brother. She had lost half her family. She had rebuilt, and she had come outside to sit with me because she was the only person alive who knew exactly what that bench felt like. Something shifted after that. Not all at once, but steady. Carol Jeffries, the woman who had sat 2 desks over from me at the Pierce County Assessor's office for 12 years, started bringing lunch to my desk. She had never done that before. Chicken salad on Tuesdays, leftover stew on Thursdays. She didn't make a speech about it. She just set the container on my desk and said, I made too much, every time, for weeks. Then she started a book club at the office. 4 of us. Wednesday lunches in the break room. We read a mystery novel first, something light, something that had nothing to do with real life. Carol organized it. Carol picked the book. Carol made sure I was included. I don't know if she ever learned the full story of what happened with Patricia. She never asked. She just noticed the empty space around me and decided to fill it. That is what some people do. They don't wait for you to explain. They just show up. Marcus did not call for 2 weeks after the sentencing. 14 days. I counted every one of them the way I count everything, automatically, precisely, with a running total in my head that updated every morning when I woke up and the phone had not rung. He was 28. He had learned about all of it at once: the fraud, the checks, the 19 years, the silence, the threat his mother's sister made using his name. He had never known any of it. And then he knew everything. I told myself he needed time. I told myself he was processing. I told myself that 28-year-old men do not always know how to call their mothers when the world turns upside down. I told myself all of that, and none of it made the silence any easier. On the 15th day, my phone rang. I was sitting at my kitchen table. It was evening. I saw his name on the screen and my hands went still the way they do when something important is about to happen. Mom. Hey, baby. Silence. 3 seconds. 4, 5. I'm proud of you. 4 words. His voice cracked on the last one, and something I had been holding since the day I walked into that courtroom. Something deeper than the secret, deeper than the silence. Something that lived in the part of me that had been afraid my son would look at me differently. That thing broke open. I cried. I had not cried during the cooperation. I had not cried during the arrest. I had not cried during the sentencing or when Tanya screamed or when I set the table for 2 on Thanksgiving. But when my son said those 4 words, the tears came, and they came from a place so far down I did not know it was there. I love you, Marcus. I love you too, Mom. I just needed to understand. That was the whole conversation. He came to dinner the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that, and the one after that. The empty chairs at my table did not all stay empty. One of them filled back up, and one was enough. It is 2014 now. I am sitting at my desk at the Pierce County Assessor's Office. Same desk I have sat at for 22 years. Same filing cabinet to my left. Same window behind me that lets in the light from the parking lot in the morning. I am processing a property transfer, a death certificate attached. Someone's father, a family doing the right thing, reporting the death, closing the accounts, filing the paperwork honestly. The kind of file I have processed 10,000 times. I set it in the completed tray. I pick up the next one. I take a breath and the air moves through my lungs the way air is supposed to, without weight, without resistance, without the sound of a drawer full of envelopes opening in the back of my mind every time I close my eyes. I make $38,400 a year. I eat lunch at my desk. I drive a car with 180,000 miles on it. My life is small and modest and honest, and every dollar in it is mine. The truth cost me my sister. It cost me my aunt. It cost me the cousins who stopped calling and the holiday table that used to seat 8. It cost me the family I thought I had, the one that was held together by silence and fraud money and the understanding that we would all look the other way forever. But silence costs more. It costs you your sleep. It costs you your teeth. It costs you 16 years of standing next to a lie and pretending it is loyalty. Geneva was right. The truth does not get lighter. But the day you put it down is the day you start breathing again. I put it down, and I breathe now.